something that wasn't even dead. Just let me be me. My life would be a dang boring story, a book that no one would buy. I ain't never done nothing important. I was born, I'll work and I'll die. I'm leaving no one behind in this life. All my parts have gone on ahead. The only way this world will even know when I'm gone is if someone notices my empty bed. But as I sat on his porch contemplating on what he called his two-bit place, I just couldn't believe what he told me was true. He left more than just empty space. I considered the folks at the funeral, barely a dozen counting me and my wife, but each had his own separate story, how Smokey had touched their life. There was Mrs. Martin, the widow. Her cowboy's been dead nearly 13 years, but she still can't hardly mention his name without her eyes filling up with tears. No one could get her to move into town. Her and Fred had built that place together, but she still doesn't have electricity and just a wood stove for heat in bad weather. So every Sunday morning all summer, old Smokey went up on the hill. By 2 o'clock, he was at Mrs. B's door, trading cordwood for a home-cooked meal. On the back row sat the Johnson family. They say their debt they could never repay. When Steve broke his leg 3 winters ago, Smokey fed his cows every day. He'd hitch up the team and load the sled. Each feed took about 2 times. It was usually well after dark each night before Smokey would finally get done. It was about 6 weeks that he helped them, but they wouldn't take any pay. He said he was just doing what any neighbor would do. Shoot, he needed the exercise anyway. But everyone in the valley knew different. Bad luck had left the Johnsons broke. They'd have probably lost everything they had if it hadn't been for old Smoke. Now, Dean Elliott was there with his mom and dad. Now, there's a story to tell. If it hadn't been for Smokey, that kid was headed straight to the devil. At 17, he was over 6 foot tall. He weighed nearly 200 pounds. All he wanted to do was to fight and to drink. Him and his dad had gone quite a few rounds. He was what you might call a juvenile delinquent. Him and trouble were one and the same, till the night that he tangled with Smokey, and he found himself in a real man's game. It was Saturday night and the weather was warm. Smokey had rode his old Happy to town. D.R. had been drinking and he was hunting trouble, which in that old cowboy he thought he had found. He made some unfavorable remarks to Smokey, hoping to ride him somehow. He said, any man who would ride an Appaloosa would be just as well off riding a cow. Well, Smokey just sat there rolling the smoke, so D.R. gave up and turned around. But he had only taken a couple of steps, and he found himself on the ground. Now, he wasn't too sure what had made him fall, but he was sure enough flat on his back. Then he raised his head, just in time to see Smokey taking up his slack. Then he watched that old cowboy take a dally, then step down from his seat. D.R. went crazy like a bear in a trap, trying to rip that rope off his feet. He'd roll a couple of times forward till he'd get the rope somewhat loose. But just as he'd start to remove it, the slack was took up by that old Appaloosa. Well, that went on for about 5 minutes, with D.R. struggling there in the street. So mad his dirty face was streaked with tears. But he finally lay still in defeat. Smokey casually looked him over and said, son, you've a lot to learn. If you spend your life calling other men out, pain and disappointment is all that you learn. Then Smokey stepped back in the saddle, removed the downy from his tree. Then he flipped some slack to the youngster so he was able to get himself free. D.R. took the rope from around his ankles. He was shaky but able to stand. Then he stood there staring at that old cowboy. And then he grinned and stuck out his hand. He said, I don't always think before I speak, and sometimes, well, I guess I'm a dope. make sure he ain't packing wood. And that's how the friendship started. Although strange, most folks would agree. Between a kid too big for his britches and an old cowboy on a spotted pony. Most weekends found DR at Smokey's place. The two of them worked side by side. DR enjoyed the help and the company, or Smokey enjoyed the help and the company, and DR learned to rope and to ride. But there was something even more important that he learned from that quiet old man. He learned to take pride in a job well done and help others whenever you can. Well, that's just a few of the stories, but I think my point is well made. Smokey had been someone important, and his memory won't easily fade. Possessions aren't the measure of a man's success. I think it's friends and good deeds instead. So Smokey, if